Something unprecedented happened this week when Donald Trump addressed military generals in Virginia that has the entire chain of command questioning everything. Not a single military official approved of what they witnessed. Conservative generals, some likely Trump supporters themselves, left the room in stunned silence. What they saw has triggered the same question an Air Force officer asked in 1973 that cost him his entire career. Are these orders coming from a sane president? This isn't speculation or partisan commentary. This is about what happened when Trump and Defense Secretary Hegseth gathered high-ranking military officials at Quantico for what should have been a routine briefing. Instead, military leaders witnessed a performance so disturbing that reporters covering the event couldn't find a single person who approved of Trump's speech. Not one general, not one military official. And these weren't all liberals. Many were die-hard conservatives, possibly even MAGA supporters. But nobody liked what they saw. Trump's military speech revealed something that has military leadership deeply concerned about Trump's mental health and cognitive decline. Throughout most of the address, military generals sat stone-faced in dead silence. The atmosphere was so uncomfortable that Trump actually had to beg them to applaud, pulling a moment reminiscent of Jeb Bush asking crowds to clap. Military officials weren't just unimpressed, they were worried, concerned, and according to multiple reports, questioning the mental state of their commander-in-chief. Both Trump and Hegseth attacked the military leadership during the speech, essentially telling generals if they didn't like what they were hearing to get out. These are the same military officials who receive orders from Trump that get transmitted to thousands of troops. The same generals who control nuclear launch protocols. The same commanders responsible for executing presidential orders without question. And they're now asking themselves a terrifying question about Trump cognitive decline. Tom Nichols, writing for The Atlantic, connected this moment to a critical incident from 1973. Air Force nuclear missile officer Harold Herring asked a simple question during training that destroyed his military career. He wanted to know how he could be certain that an order to launch nuclear missiles came from a sane president. Military members are trained to execute orders, not question them. Disobeying orders carries severe disciplinary consequences, including jail time. But Herring's question haunts this moment because military officials at Quantico witnessed both the man who orders nuclear strikes and the man who verifies those orders give what Nichols called disgraceful and unnerving performances. How many military generals left that room asking themselves Herring's question about Trump mental health? The military chain of command operates on absolute obedience. Superior officers give orders, and subordinates follow them without hesitation. That's fundamental military discipline. But at some point, military leadership must evaluate whether commands come from someone mentally capable of making those decisions. After witnessing Trump's performance, that evaluation is happening right now. What exactly did these military officials witness that triggered such concern about Trump cognitive decline? Trump bragged about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, something he doesn't have constitutional authority to do. The Gulf of Mexico is still called the Gulf of Mexico. He launched attacks on Barack Obama and Joe Biden during what should have been a military briefing. Trump went on lengthy tangents about auto pens and his signature, telling military generals how much everyone loves his signature. None of this was normal protocol for addressing military leadership. Trump claimed he ended 8 wars, upgrading from 7 wars he claimed last week. He hasn't actually ended any wars, but he repeats these same stories at every appearance, bragging about identical accomplishments each time. Repetitive storytelling about the same events is a recognized sign of dementia. When someone can only recall the same stories over and over, that indicates serious Trump cognitive decline. Military officials watching this performance understand the implications. The Trump military speech highlighted concerns that extend beyond one uncomfortable briefing. Trump's behavior on Truth Social, his public appearances, and now his address to military generals all point toward accelerating mental decline. Military leadership is trained to follow orders, but they're also trained to recognize when the chain of command is compromised. What happens when military officials receive orders from a president whose mental state is questionable? This creates an unprecedented constitutional crisis regarding military command authority. Military generals cannot simply refuse presidential orders because they disagree with policy or even question Trump's mental health. The military chain of command doesn't work that way. Soldiers face court-martial for disobeying direct orders. But military officers also take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, not blindly follow any order regardless of circumstance. The situation raises questions that haven't been seriously tested in modern American history. If Trump's cognitive decline continues accelerating, at what point does military leadership have a duty to evaluate presidential fitness? Military officials cannot diagnose mental health conditions. They cannot override civilian command authority. But they witnessed something at Quantico that has them deeply worried about the sanity of their commander-in-chief. Trump's physical deterioration is also undeniable, according to observers. Combined with cognitive decline, military leadership faces the possibility of a completely incapacitated president issuing orders that affect national security and potentially nuclear weapons. What does military brass do if that scenario materializes? Do they continue following orders regardless of presidential mental state? Or do they invoke safeguards that could be interpreted as military intervention in civilian government? These aren't theoretical questions anymore after the Trump military speech. Military generals are actively asking themselves whether orders they receive come from someone mentally competent to issue them. The officers at Quantico saw Trump's behavior firsthand. They witnessed the repetitive stories, the bizarre tangents, the attacks on political opponents during a military briefing, and the desperation for applause from an audience that remained silent. Military leadership understands the stakes. They control weapon systems, troop deployments, and responses to international crises. Commands from a president experiencing severe cognitive decline could have catastrophic consequences. But the military also understands its constitutional role. Civilian control of the military is fundamental to American democracy. Military officials cannot simply decide they don't trust their commander-in-chief and refuse orders. The tension between these realities has military generals in an impossible position. They took oaths to follow lawful orders from the president. But they also took oaths to protect the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. What happens when those duties conflict because of questions about Trump's mental health and fitness for command? The answer may come sooner than anyone wants to consider. Trump's cognitive decline appears to be accelerating rather than stabilizing. Military officials witnessed that decline directly at Quantico. They left that room with serious concerns about the mental state of the man who controls nuclear launch codes and commands military operations worldwide. This is where Harold Herring's question from 1973 becomes critically relevant. Can military officials know with certainty that orders come from a sane president? After the Trump military speech, military leadership is asking that question not theoretically, but practically. And nobody has clear answers about what happens next. All eyes are now on military leadership to navigate this unprecedented crisis. The next major international incident will test whether military generals follow orders without question, or whether concerns about Trump's mental health force a constitutional reckoning about presidential fitness. The coming weeks will reveal whether the military chain of command can sustain itself when the commander-in-chief's cognitive decline is this apparent.